The story begins in an adventurer's guild in the kingdom of Turquoise. A receptionist gave a sharp look at a man who was trying to register as a tamer. The man explained that being a tamer meant forming a contract with a monster from many different types that existed. The man registering confirmed this, adding that tamed monsters fought alongside tamers and provided support. The receptionist was pleased that the man understood the basics, but he questioned why the man didn't have a monster with him. He said it was impossible to register as an adventurer without one. The man claimed he could tame creatures called phantasmas and pointed to something above his shoulder. He introduced his fire spirit, Claire. However, the receptionist couldn't see anything and, growing irritated, finally lost his patience. When the man added that he had 2 more phantasma, the receptionist angrily told him to leave. The man, Kohaku, had received the divine job of Tamer. However, the monsters he could bond with were limited to phantasmas, a type that no one else could see or hear. Because of this, he was rejected by every guild he tried to join. As he walked away, other adventurers whispered behind his back, calling him an incompetent Tamer who lied about having invisible monsters. Kohaku couldn't hold back his tears. Claire, the fire spirit, started venting her frustration. She was angry that people kept rejecting Kohaku wherever he went. Kohaku tried to stay calm, saying it couldn't be helped, but Claire's patience was wearing thin. She hated the rumors calling him incompetent and a liar. Kohaku noticed her anger and told her she was getting upset on his behalf while he wasn't even worried for himself. He smiled and thanked her, his bright expression nearly dazzling Claire. Embarrassed, she blushed and told him to get angry for his own sake. Claire asked why Kohaku insisted on being a Tamer when he could easily pretend to be a fire magician. With her help, it wouldn't be hard to convince people. Kohaku refused to lie about his divine job. Claire sighed, frustrated that humans cared so much about divine jobs. As they walked home, Kohaku thought there was no way around it. They lived in a world where divine jobs ruled everything. A person's divine job decided their entire future, and Kohaku had no choice but to follow those rules. He believed that if he worked harder, he might one day achieve his dreams. Claire noticed the sadness on Kohaku's face as he opened the door. Inside the house, 2 phantasmas, Marionette Sufia and the divine wolf Fen, welcomed their master warmly. Kohaku greeted them back with a small smile. Sufia offered to take his robe while Fen asked how things had gone. Kohaku admitted he had failed again. Fen comforted him, saying they would be happy no matter where their master ended up. Kohaku paused, then quietly thanked Fen. Claire felt moved watching the scene, but it was quickly interrupted by Sufia aggressively sniffing Kohaku's robe. Sufia froze, pretending nothing had happened, but Claire called her out for burying her face in it. Sufia denied it, claiming it was all in Claire's imagination. Claire blushed and argued back. Watching the two tease each other, Kohaku smiled and thought they seemed to be doing just fine. Then Fen asked Kohaku what he planned to do next. Kohaku realized that every guild in the country had rejected him. After thinking for a moment, he asked if everyone would be okay with moving. He explained his idea of trying his luck in another country's guild. He figured rumors about him might already be spreading near the borders, so going to a faraway land seemed like the best choice. Finally, he decided they would head to the kingdom of Brumund. Claire remembered hearing about a special guild in Brumund that was only for Tamers. Fen said she would go anywhere Kohaku went. When Sufia heard this, she looked jealous, and Claire could feel her hostility. Sufia then asked Kohaku to take her, but her tone suggested she meant something else. Claire quickly cut in, saying she would go with Kohaku too. Kohaku felt thankful for their support but had no idea about the silent rivalry between the two girls. He then told them to get ready, as they would leave the next day. Later that night, Sufia went out to the backyard and opened a screen. On the other side, the worried faces of several individuals appeared. These were high-level phantasmas who had settled in the remote Turquoise kingdom. Sufia told them that her master had decided to leave Turquoise and move to Brumund. The phantasmas were shocked. They had worked hard to gain the people's faith and even believed in them as gods. They couldn't believe this news. Sufia tried to calm them down. She explained that her master had given up on the kingdom because it had failed to see his worth. Not only that, but the kingdom had pushed him so far that he chose to leave. Sufia asked the group if they had any regrets about the kingdom that had driven Kohaku away. In unison, they all said they felt no attachment to it anymore. The next morning, the king of Turquoise was shocked when they didn't receive a prophecy from Gaia, the god they were worshipping. Even though they had offered many gifts, nothing happened. Confused but determined, the king told everyone to keep their faith in Gaia and wait for the oracle. Suddenly, a servant ran into the throne room with alarming news. The guild's strongest warrior, known as the Sword Saint, had suddenly lost all their powers and skills. The king was stunned and thought it might be a mental issue, but the servant insisted it happened without warning. The king couldn't understand how a spirit's power could just disappear. Before he could process this, more servants rushed in with troubling reports. The country's water and crops had worsened, and even the saintess had lost her powers. Another servant reported that the guild's great magician was powerless. Others mentioned that the alchemist's abilities were gone. and the air had turned polluted, which allowed demons to invade the land. Overwhelmed by the disaster, the king broke down in tears. Meanwhile, Gaia suddenly remembered something, and another god asked her what was wrong. She admitted she had forgotten to say goodbye to the church. The god, clad in armor, dismissed her concern, saying it was unnecessary. He explained that the moment they left the country, its destruction was inevitable. He added that greeting the humans wouldn't change anything. Gaia agreed. The armored god revealed that he had also taken back the swords he had given to humans, saying a country that disrespected Kohaku didn't deserve them. He reminded the others to follow Kohaku and leave everything else behind. Kohaku and his familiars began their journey to a new home. After traveling for days and nights, they finally reached the capital of the Kingdom of Broom and Alex. Claire encouraged Kohaku to stay confident, assuring him that things would work out this time. With determination, Kohaku walked toward his new country, ready to start again. Kohaku went to the checkpoint and handed over the papers needed to prove his identity and enter the city. The guard saw that Kohaku was listed as a Tamer and asked where his tamed monsters were. Kohaku froze for a moment and glanced to the side, where his phantasmas stood. As expected, the guard couldn't see them. To avoid trouble, Kohaku said he didn't have any monsters yet. Claire, who was with him, looked shocked. Kohaku figured it was better to seem inexperienced than to reveal the truth about his phantasma. The guard didn't make fun of him or ask more questions. Instead, he assumed Kohaku was just starting his journey and welcomed him warmly into the capital. As Kohaku walked through the city, he wondered if the guard thought he was strange. It was the first time anyone had spoken to him so kindly. While he was lost in thought, Sufia stopped him and pointed out the quickest way to the Tamer's guild. Kohaku praised and thanked her, and Sufia celebrated the compliment in her own cheerful way. Knowing that no one in this country knew about him yet, Kohaku felt confident he could succeed here. When he reached the Tamer's guild, he stood outside for a moment to gather his courage. Then he stepped inside and was amazed to see all kinds of monsters. The guild was lively and so different from the one in Turquoise. But suddenly the monsters around him froze and started trembling. The Tamers nearby looked confused as they tried to figure out what was going on. Kohaku started sweating when he remembered something important. Monsters could see his phantasmas. He thought back to a time when a small mouse-like monster had quivered in front of Sufia. Sufia had explained that phantasmas were the strongest type of monster, and other creatures were naturally terrified of them. Since monsters couldn't talk, they showed their fear by shaking. At that moment, the mouse-like monster's stomach growled. Kohaku noticed and felt bad for scaring it, so he gave it an apple. The monster looked puzzled at first, but Kohaku told it to go ahead and eat. The act of kindness moved Sufia. She thought it was wonderful that her master cared for all monsters, even the ones afraid of him. Back to the present, Kohaku went to register at the guild. The receptionist told him to wait for a moment. While waiting, he glanced around and noticed how scared the monsters nearby looked. Feeling bad for making them nervous, he promised himself he would leave quickly. A guild staff member named Saria soon approached him and asked if he wanted to register. Kohaku nervously said yes. Saria then brought out a strange object and asked him to touch it. Confused, Kohaku asked what it was. Saria explained it was a special crystal made just for the Tamer's Guild. It could show a person's Tamer job and reveal the types and number of monsters they could tame. This crystal was something only the Tamer's Guild had. Kohaku, still unsure, asked if it could really do that. Saria confirmed it could. Kohaku stared silently at the crystal and Saria noticed. She asked if something was wrong. Kohaku said nothing was wrong, but inside he felt deeply moved. He had been searching for something like this for so long, and now it was right in front of him. Behind him, the three phantasmas looked excited. Claire encouraged him to give it a try, while Sufia wondered if the crystal could detect them. Kohaku finally touched the crystal. Suddenly it glowed with an incredibly bright light. The phantasmas grew more excited, and Kohaku silently wished they would calm down. After a few seconds, the light faded. Saria told Kohaku to let go of the crystal. She noticed 3 golden lights coming from it and said she could use those to figure out his Tamer information. As she looked through the documents, Saria began to sweat nervously. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. Then Saria's tone changed completely. She suddenly asked Kohaku, in an intense voice, if he was a phantasma Tamer. The people around them were confused by her reaction. Kohaku simply answered that he was. Saria realized she had made a mistake, so she brought Kohaku to the reception office to apologize. She knelt on all fours and formally said sorry for raising her voice in front of everyone. Kohaku told her it was fine and asked her to sit down and talk. Saria thanked him and took a seat. Kohaku asked why she had seemed so surprised earlier, since she must have known something about the crystal. Saria explained that the light on the crystal changes color depending on the type of monster it can tame. Red meant beasts, purple meant insects, green stood for natural creatures, black for dragons, and so on. However, the color of phantasmas had always been a mystery, until now. Kohaku then asked what this golden light meant. Saria shared that the golden color wasn't even mentioned in the instruction manual. She concluded that it must represent phantasmas and guessed that Kohaku was a phantasma Tamer. Kohaku confirmed it, admitting he was indeed one. Saria got excited when she noticed there were 3 golden lights. She assumed Kohaku already had 3 phantasmas. Kohaku confirmed this and pointed to the corner of the room. Saria immediately got up to check it out. In the corner, the 3 phantasmas were watching Saria, looking confused. Suddenly, Saria started panting heavily and giggling while staring at them. The phantasmas freaked out and ran to hide behind Kohaku. Claire commented on how creepy Saria was acting, and Sufia even suggested they get rid of her. Kohaku told them to calm down. Kohaku called Saria over, snapping her out of her strange behavior. She explained that she was a monster enthusiast and couldn't contain her excitement over discovering a new species. Kohaku realized Saria was that kind of person, a true monster fanatic. Despite her excitement, Saria recognized Kohaku as a phantasma Tamer, and Kohaku asked how he could prove it to others. Saria smiled confidently and said it would be easy. She suggested he battle their guildmaster. Just then, a woman, accompanied by her attendant, walked into the reception room. The scene shifted to Bruman's arena. Saria brought Kohaku to meet the guildmaster of the Tamir's Guild. The guildmaster, Tawa Irihim, introduced herself with a cheerful smile and asked if Kohaku was the phantasma Tamer. Kohaku nervously admitted that he was. Tawa laughed and told him not to be scared, calling him a cute kid. Kohaku quickly corrected her, saying he wasn't a child and would soon turn 20. Tawa smiled and said he was still a kid in her eyes. Kohaku felt confused because Tawa looked about his age. Even though she appeared young and beautiful, Kohaku sensed something powerful about her. He remembered stories of Tamers who were stronger than their familiars, and he was certain Tawa was one of them. Kohaku respected her strength, but he couldn't help worrying about his familiars causing trouble. They surrounded Tawa, playing around her because she couldn't see them. Kohaku grew anxious since this was his chance to get a proper job. He knew he had to act, so he snapped his fingers, making the phantasmas disappear from around Tawa. Tawa looked puzzled and asked what he was doing. Kohaku explained that he had called back the ones hanging near her. Tawa then remembered that phantasmas were invisible to others. Kohaku was surprised but relieved that Tawa believed in him. Next, Tawa decided to introduce her own tamed creature. She raised her arms and gently called out a name. Crush. Kohaku looked up as a massive shadow appeared in the sky. While phantasmas were unseen and often doubted, dragons were visible and undeniable. To everyone, dragons were considered the strongest creatures in existence. When Tawa revealed her tamed monster, Kohaku quickly recognized it as a drake-type dragon. Tawa confirmed this and introduced it as the Black Dragon. Among dragons there was a ranking system and drake types were at the top. Dragons usually came in common colors, but black ones were considered the strongest because they were extremely tough and fierce. This made them true monsters in every sense. However, despite the intimidating description, the 3 phantasmas with Kohaku saw the black dragon as nothing more than a winged lizard. Kohaku asked if they thought they could beat it. Fen confidently said it would be easy. Sufia answered seriously that it wouldn't be a problem. Claire, however, joked that cutting radishes was harder. To everyone's surprise, Kohaku chose Claire to fight the black dragon. Sufia warned Claire not to embarrass herself and called her a bug. Claire just laughed and teased Sufia, saying she shouldn't be upset for not being picked. Claire stepped forward and Crush, the black dragon, began growling. Towa asked if Crush's opponent was ready. Claire called the dragon cute for trying to scare her, but Kohaku told her to stop teasing. Towa then asked about Claire's abilities. Kohaku introduced her as a fire spirit, but Towa hesitated, her expression making Kohaku nervous. Claire reassured Kohaku, saying everything would be fine and to leave it to her. Reluctantly, Kohaku decided to trust her. Saria asked if both were ready and they confirmed they were. She gave the signal and the 2 Tamers commanded their creatures. Crush attacked first, unleashing a fiery breath, but Kohaku stood unharmed. Tawa was shocked to see that Claire had created a powerful defensive barrier. It was surprising because a black dragon's breath was strong enough to melt steel. Kohaku explained that Claire was the most powerful fire elemental among the phantasmas and could neutralize any fire. Claire laughed and told Crush to bow its head. Kohaku silently hoped Claire wouldn't get too carried away. Tawa had expected this kind of capability from a phantasma. She ordered Crush, the black dragon, to attack, and it went in for a physical strike. However, Claire called them foolish and used a barrier to block the attack. Tawa was shocked to see a dragon's claws being stopped for the first time. Claire nearly lost control of her power but managed to hold on just in time. She felt relieved, though Kohaku decided she would give Claire a lecture later. Tawa then told Crush to put something on. Kohaku quickly figured out what she meant and told Claire to back away. A dark, murky aura suddenly wrapped around Crush's claws, and with one strong push it shattered Claire's barrier. Tawa praised Kohaku for making a smart move. Claire managed to dodge the powerful attack just in time. Both Claire and Kohaku recognized what was happening. It was enchant power. Tawa confirmed their guess. Enchant power was a special kind of magic that enhanced the body. Usually only humans could use it, but monsters could gain access to it in one specific way. They had to form a contract with a human who had that magic. This meant Tawa had enchant power. In a rush, Kohaku took their turn. Claire unleashed a powerful blast of fire, but it was useless. Tawa and Crush managed to dodge it by flying high into the sky. Tawa was amazed that a phantasma could block all their attacks and even had a fire breath as strong as a dragon's. She asked if fire spirits could use fire magic endlessly without limits. Kohaku confirmed it and explained that they could also control heat, making them experts in all heat-related abilities. Tawa was surprised and burst into laughter. She couldn't believe a phantasma could be that strong and admitted she still had a lot to learn. She landed back on the ground and asked about the other two phantasmas. Kohaku assured her that they were just as strong as Claire. Sufia and Claire started arguing, but Fen didn't seem to care. He was confident he was the best. While Kohaku tried to calm them down, Tawa turned to Crush for her opinion. Crush simply said she had no complaints. Tawa then reached out her hand and officially welcomed Kohaku as a hunter in their Tamer's guild. Those were the words Kohaku had been waiting to hear his entire life. This moment marked the first step toward achieving his dream. Not long after, Kohaku sat quietly on a sofa, looking around the guildmaster's office. He was surprised by how clean and organized it was, especially compared to the messy, alcohol-smelling offices of the male guildmasters he had visited before. Tawa soon returned with tea to serve. As she moved around, Kohaku couldn't help but notice how beautiful she was. He felt nervous because Tawa was the first woman to treat him kindly, apart from Claire and Sufia. Trying to calm him, Tawa told him not to be nervous and joked that she wouldn't bite like Crush. Kohaku laughed, but Tawa, with her serious face, claimed she wasn't joking. This left Kohaku frozen until she admitted it was a joke after all. Even so, Kohaku felt uneasy. He couldn't tell when Tawa was joking because her expression never changed. Nearby, Sufia was busy scolding Claire and Fen for sneaking bites of the cookies. When Tawa noticed the cookies disappearing, she asked Kohaku if the phantasmas were eating them. Kohaku admitted they were enjoying the cookies and apologized. Tawa didn't mind as long as they were happy, since she had made the cookies herself. Kohaku was excited to learn they were handmade, but his excitement turned to disappointment when he realized his familiars had eaten every single one. He couldn't believe Claire and Fen didn't leave him even a crumb. Just then, Sufia appeared out of nowhere like a ninja, holding Kohaku's portion of the cookies. Relieved, Kohaku thanked her, making it another victory for Sufia. When he took a bite, he found the cookie delicious. Tawa was happy to hear it suited his taste. After their relaxing break, it was time to get to the main reason for their meeting. Tawa handed Kohaku a letter, leaving him confused. She told him to open it, and inside he found a brooch. Kohaku was shocked. Tawa explained that it was proof he was now a member of their guild. However, Kohaku noticed the brooch was bronze, a level higher than the usual iron rank for beginners. When he questioned it, Tawa reminded him how he had fought Crush head-on. Because of his performance, he was granted an exception and started at the bronze rank. Kohaku sat silently, staring at the brooch in his hand. He remembered how he had spent 7 years trying to join a guild as a Tamer. People had always doubted him, calling him a liar because they couldn't see the phantasmas he talked about. No one believed him. But now, with Tawa standing in front of him and the brooch in his hand, he realized all his struggles had led to this moment. He had come this far thanks to his father's words. Without them, things might have turned out very differently. Seeing the look on his face, Tawa encouraged Kohaku to do his best. She assured him that, as the guildmaster, she would always support him and wouldn't let anyone criticize him. Her kindness overwhelmed Kohaku, and tears began to stream down his face. The phantasmas, concerned for their master, tried to cheer him up in their own way. Tawa, understanding how much he had gone through, gently patted his head and told him it was okay to cry if it would help lighten his heart. The phantasmas watched quietly as Tawa comforted Kohaku. Meanwhile, Sufia and Claire grew uneasy seeing another woman so close to their master. Kohaku asked them to calm down, assuring them that he was fine. Tawa told him not to hesitate if he ever wanted to lean on her for support, but Kohaku explained he couldn't allow himself to depend on others too much. Grateful for her thoughtfulness, he thanked her. Tawa then told him to stand as she approached and pinned the brooch onto his clothes. Kohaku froze for a moment, noticing her gentle presence and the faint feminine scent she carried. Sufia and Claire, on the other hand, were visibly uncomfortable with what they were witnessing. Afterward, Tawa asked Kohaku to look in the mirror. When he did, he stood still, overwhelmed by the sight of himself wearing the guild brooch. The phantasmas cheered excitedly for their master. Tawa explained that Kohaku was now eligible to take on quests, and directed him to Saria for more details. Kohaku promised to do his best, bowed respectfully to Tawa, and then left, feeling ready for what lay ahead. Saria congratulated Kohaku and said she hoped they could work together from then on. First, she asked if Kohaku knew how the guild worked. Kohaku learned that people in town would post requests and guild members would complete those tasks. Saria explained that these requests could be about searching for items, gathering materials, or even fighting monsters. Since Kohaku was still a bronze rank, he could only take on searching and gathering quests for now. She also mentioned that bronze members could deal with weaker monsters. Kohaku asked if iron-ranked members could do the same. Saria confirmed they could, but added that iron platers usually focused on searching and gathering too. Hearing this, Kohaku felt excited to start at the bottom and work his way up through the ranks. Saria then asked Kohaku if he was interested in fighting monsters. Although he was still a beginner, Kohaku said he wanted to try searching and gathering quests first. He thought there must be lots of people who needed help, and he wanted to assist them however he could, even if it was in small ways. Saria was surprised by his answer. It brought back a sad memory of her crying over her dying tamed monster. She had met other bronze-ranked members in the past, but they didn't seem like Kohaku. Most cared more about earning money than helping others. Saria told him he was a truly kind person. Kohaku noticed the sadness in her expression and wondered why, but before he could ask, Saria invited him to follow her to accept a request. She led him to a bulletin board and explained how it worked. The safer quests were posted there, while the more dangerous ones, meant for gold-ranked members and higher, had to be taken from the reception desk. Kohaku saw many gathering and searching quests on the board. After looking around, he decided to take a herb gathering quest. Saria guided him to confirm the application. At the same time, Tawa, the guild leader, got a report from her assistant that Kohaku had chosen a herb gathering quest for his first task. Tawa had expected this and smiled to herself. Watching from afar as Kohaku left the guild building, she wished him well. Kohaku, full of excitement, set off on his first quest as a new guild member. In the forest, Kohaku and his familiars searched for herbs to make recovery medicine. Claire, looking at the plants, wondered how they could tell them apart since they all seemed the same to her. Kohaku said it would be easy and asked Sufia for help. Sufia focused and activated a detection field in the area. Soon, Kohaku pointed out the glowing red grass and told Claire those were the herbs they needed. He asked her to fly around and collect as many as possible. Excited, Claire zipped around gathering the herbs while the others helped pull them out of the ground. After some time, Fen showed Kohaku a herb he found that smelled different from the others. Sufia explained it was a special mutated herb of a higher quality. Fen asked if he did well and Kohaku praised him. Deciding it was valuable, Kohaku separated the rare herb from the others. His familiars eagerly joined in to help. When they finished, Kohaku returned to the guild, where Saria welcomed him back and asked about the gathering quest. Exhausted, Kohaku admitted he had gained new respect for the iron platers who did this kind of task every day. Saria asked him to place the herbs on the reception desk so she could use her appraisal skill. Kohaku called over Fen and reached into the air, making bags appear out of nowhere. Saria looked confused, so Kohaku explained one of his familiars had carried the bags on his back. When Saria checked the herbs, her expression turned even more surprised. She carefully examined the herbs, especially the rare ones, and asked Kohaku how he managed to gather so many. Kohaku explained it was thanks to his familiars. Saria nodded, impressed, and remarked it was what she'd expect from someone with powerful phantasmas. As they talked, a guild member drinking nearby frowned while listening in. Meanwhile, Saria thanked Kohaku for bringing back a bag full of rare herbs, calling it an unusual find. Kohaku felt happy to help. Saria told him it would take some time to process the exchange and asked him to wait. Kohaku's familiars were happy that everything turned out well. Claire claimed it was all because of her, but Sufia disagreed and called her out for taking all the credit. Claire insisted that she worked hard by flying around, but Sufia argued it was her detection skills that made the difference. As their argument heated up, Sufia noticed a drunk guild member walking toward Kohaku. The man shouted that he couldn't accept someone weak like Kohaku as a guild member. He accused Kohaku of lying about being a phantasma Tamer. Another guild member tried to hold the drunk man back. Kohaku calmly said he wasn't lying and reminded them that Tawa had already approved him. The drunk man couldn't believe Kohaku was casually mentioning the guildmaster's name. The guild member holding him back kept apologizing to Kohaku, but Kohaku noticed the smell of alcohol coming from the angry man. The drunk guild member then challenged Kohaku to a fight using their familiars, claiming it would prove whether Kohaku was really a Tamer. Kohaku reminded him of the guild's rules against fighting among members, but the drunk man didn't care. Kohaku repeated the rules, but the drunk man assumed Kohaku was avoiding the fight because he didn't have any tamed monsters. Kohaku tried again to explain the rules, but then he sensed something dangerous behind him. His phantasmas were ready to attack the drunk guild member. Kohaku panicked, realizing his own familiars weren't following the rules. Seeing his nervous reaction, the drunk man thought Kohaku was just scared to fight. Suddenly, the drunk man was slapped hard by something and went tumbling to the floor. Claire was shocked to see Crush in his smaller form. Crush flew over to Kohaku's arm and let out a calm, confident growl. Kohaku couldn't help but think Crush looked really cool. Just then someone walked in and asked what was going on in her guild. Tawa greeted Kohaku and with a serious look asked what was happening. Kohaku quickly realized she was upset and explained the situation. After hearing everything, Tawa announced that Kohaku was truly a phantasma Tamer, just as skilled as her and Crush during their fight. She then told the drunk guild member to bring any complaints directly to her. When the drunk member tried to respond, Tawa asked if he was questioning her decisions. The man couldn't say much and just apologized. Even Kohaku felt the tension from Tawa's words. He said he didn't mind the rude comments, but Tawa firmly replied that she was handling it to prevent similar problems in the future. She reminded everyone about avoiding fights between guild members. Kohaku quietly pointed out that this rule applied to Tawa too. She paused for a moment, then said his words were interesting. Realizing he might have said too much, Kohaku quickly covered his mouth to avoid more slip-ups. While Tawa was still talking to the drunk member, Saria returned and asked if something had happened. Kohaku brushed it off, saying it was nothing. Saria then confirmed the results of his task. Since Kohaku brought back more than required, he was rewarded with 10 silver coins and 5 copper coins. Noticing the separate currencies, he asked if he could exchange copper coins for silver ones. Saria explained that 100 copper coins could be exchanged for 1 silver coin, and the same applied to gold and platinum coins. She then surprised Kohaku by handing him 4 gold coins as payment for the 40 kilograms of superior herbs he had delivered. Saria asked if Kohaku wanted to continue his quest, but he decided to call it a day because he needed to find an inn first. As they walked through the streets, Claire pointed at some food stalls and asked Kohaku if she could try something. Sufia commented on how Claire had been eating non-stop since they left the guild and called her greedy. Kohaku moved around the city to ask about prices. He told Claire to hold off on eating for now because their main goal was to find a place to stay. He promised to get her some food later. Then, he asked Sufia to pull up a map with affordable inns nearby. Sufia projected a map onto a nearby wall, showing an inn that cost 50 copper coins per night. The price included breakfast and dinner. Kohaku wondered if the price was normal, and Sufia said she thought so. Kohaku figured that a bronze-plate adventurer who could handle basic quests could just afford to stay there. Since the deal included 2 meals a day, it seemed reasonable, so he decided to check out the inn. When they arrived, a little girl greeted them warmly and welcomed them to Fleur Inn. Kohaku asked if there were any available rooms, and the girl said there were. She asked how many nights he planned to stay. Kohaku said he would pay 10 silver coins for now. The little girl thought for a moment and guessed he planned to stay 40 nights. However, her mother quickly stepped in and corrected her, saying it would actually be 20 nights. Both the mother and daughter apologized for the mistake, but Kohaku said it was no problem. For registration, Kohaku gave them his name. Afterward, the mother asked the little girl to guide him to his room, number 205. In his room, Kohaku handed his clothes to Sufia as he got ready for bed. Claire glared at Sufia, asking if she planned to do any sniffing again. Sufia paused for a moment before saying she wouldn't, but Claire didn't believe her because of the weird pause. Kohaku sat quietly on his bed, gazing out the window. His thoughts drifted to the kind people he had met in this country, so different from the ones in the previous place he lived. Claire broke the silence by asking what the plan was for the next day. Kohaku said he wanted to take some iron gathering requests in the morning and, if there was still time, work on elimination requests in the afternoon. Claire then suggested they focus on monsters with bones if he picked an elimination request. She mentioned wanting something like a dragon, but Kohaku laughed, saying that was impossible for someone like him, a bronze plater. They both laughed and kept chatting about their plans. Meanwhile, outside the town, a black-haired man learned about a phantasma tamer joining the Tamer's guild. Curious, he turned to his partner, Asur, and asked for his thoughts. Asur simply said he wanted to meet this tamer soon. The next morning at the guild, Saria showed Kohaku 2 iron mining requests. The locations were the Bleos and Raisin mines. Kohaku quickly said he had already decided on the Raisin mines. He explained that his familiar had told him the Raisin mines had better quality iron ore. Saria was surprised but remembered that the guild was running low on high-quality iron ore. She thanked Kohaku in advance. However, Saria worried about the distance. The Raisin mines were 5 days away by carriage, while the Bleos mines were only 2 days away. Kohaku thought the distance made it even more important to go. He wanted to bring back the high-quality ore the guild needed as a way to repay them for welcoming him. Hearing this, Sufia felt moved by her master's words. Saria understood Kohaku's reasoning and agreed with his decision. Kohaku then returned to the inn and called Frederica. He told her he had taken on a guild request and would be away for a few days. He asked her to prepare some food for the trip. When Frederica asked how much food, Kohaku thought about the 2 big eaters, Claire and Fen. He requested 28 servings, which left Frederica completely shocked. She guessed that Kohaku must be traveling very far. but he assured her it wasn't too far. Frederica worried the food might spoil, but Kohaku promised it would all be eaten within 3 days. This left Frederica even more confused, and she decided to tell her father about it. A little while later, Frederica returned from the kitchen and said the 28 servings would be packed as boxed meals. When Kohaku asked how much it would cost, Frederica calculated the price in her head. She said it would be 16 silver and 80 coppers. Just then, her mother came in and corrected her. It was actually only 8 silver and 40 coppers. Is it just me, or Frederica always double the price? The next morning, Kohaku and his familiars arrived at the raisin mines in just 2 hours. Fen used his sense of smell to check if there were any gas leaks, and Sufia confirmed that no humans were around. Kohaku asked Claire to light the way, and together the 4 of them entered the cave. They walked through the tunnels until they reached the iron ore site. Sufia used her detection skills, and Kohaku decided that he and Fen would handle the digging, while Sufia and Claire would load the iron ore into sacks. The mining started, and Kohaku quickly began to feel tired. Fen, on the other hand, seemed to enjoy digging through the rock. Kohaku realized Fen was much faster at digging, but he reminded himself that as the leader, he needed to do his part. After a while, Claire announced that they had already filled 4 sacks. Kohaku was shocked at how quickly things were going. He had expected the job to take 3 days, but at this pace, they could finish by tomorrow with everyone's help. Suddenly, Sufia sensed a human presence nearby. She reported that the people approaching weren't from the Tamer's guild and seemed pretty strong. Hearing this, Kohaku became curious about who they were. A moment later, a man showed up with 2 companions. They looked surprised to find someone inside the mine. The bald man turned to his friend with glasses and asked why he had said no one was here. The man with glasses claimed he had used detection magic to check earlier. Noticing the brooches they wore, Kohaku realized the group was from the Battle Guild. However, the darkness made it hard to see the color of the brooches clearly. When the bald man noticed Kohaku staring, he smiled and apologized for scaring them. He explained that they were there to mine iron ore too, and asked if Kohaku would be willing to share some. Kohaku casually pointed at a pile of iron ore nearby and told them they could take some. The men exchanged looks but didn't notice that the phantasmas were quietly trying to drive them away. Suddenly, the bald man and the man with glasses noticed the iron ore in the pile. They realized it was high quality and asked if Kohaku really planned to share it. Kohaku said it wasn't a problem. The leader thanked Kohaku for his help and offered to repay him in some way. He asked if there was anything he could do in return. Even though the man smiled, Kohaku could tell it wasn't genuine. He remembered Tawa's warning about people from the Battle Guild being short-tempered. She had told him to stay calm and handle things like he always did. She also assured him that if anything went wrong, the entire Tamer's guild would come to help. With that in mind, Kohaku knew he didn't need to be scared. Kohaku tried to stay calm, but he felt uneasy about what was happening. His familiars were ready to attack and even burn the man alive if things got worse. The man then introduced himself as Asur, and said Kohaku could stop by Alex's Battle Guild if he ever needed help. He told Kohaku to use his name. After that, Kohaku said goodbye and they went their separate ways. As soon as Asur and his group left, Kohaku dropped to his knees. He was relieved there hadn't been a fight, and thankful that they seemed like the kind of people who preferred to talk things out. He couldn't understand why he felt so tired. Sufia then reminded him to get back to mining. As they walked back outside, Asur asked the others if they had noticed the plate on Kohaku's jacket. The man with glasses said he had caught a quick look and confirmed that Kohaku was a bronze plater from the Tamer's guild. Asur then shared a rumor he had heard about the same guild. He said a phantasma Tamer had recently joined it. The bald man was surprised because phantasmas were supposed to be mythical creatures. He mentioned how strange it was that a hunter from the Tamer's guild was out on a request without any familiars around, except for Kohaku. Asur explained that Tamers weren't allowed to take on requests unless they had familiars with them. However, he admitted he didn't have enough evidence to prove anything yet. The bald man suggested they tell someone about Kohaku, but Asur said they should wait and see what happens. They didn't know how long Kohaku would stay in the mines, and if he managed to make it to a certain place, they could step in to help. As Asur's group finally left the mines, they glanced back, clearly planning something more than just collecting iron ore. The next morning, Kohaku and his familiars kept digging for iron ore. The others told Fen to take it easy, but Kohaku said their progress was thanks to Fen's hard work. Fen asked if he was doing a good job, and Kohaku assured him he was. Hearing this made Fen even more excited. Sufia, however, asked Kohaku not to spoil Fen too much. Kohaku explained that he just wanted everyone to feel comfortable. Sufia tried to ask Kohaku to spoil her too, but before she could finish, a loud crash interrupted her. The noise drowned out her words, and everyone noticed that Fen was missing. They suddenly heard Fen's voice from somewhere, saying something had opened. Claire then teased Sufia about what she had been trying to say. The group gathered around and stared at the hole Fen had made. Kohaku noticed there was much more space beyond the area they had been digging. Since they had already collected most of the ore nearby, he suggested going inside. They eventually reached a large open space with a strange flower-shaped ore in the center of the ceiling. The Phantasma sensed something unusual and warned Kohaku to stay alert, even though they were protecting him. Kohaku wondered if the danger was really that serious. He suggested they leave, but Sufia pointed out that they had already awakened something when they entered. She said it was better to fight whatever it was than to run away. Kohaku started sweating nervously, realizing they might have stirred up trouble. Suddenly, the ground shook and everyone looked up at the flower-shaped ore. A spider-like monster appeared, letting out a loud screech. Kohaku couldn't help but think it was disgusting. Outside, Asura and his team felt the monster's presence and realized that Kohaku had gone deep into the mines. They couldn't believe he had managed to reach such a dangerous area in just one day. Worried about him, they all rushed back inside to help. Even though the clues pointed to Kohaku being a Phantasma Tamer, Asura knew the monster was too strong for him to handle alone. He told his teammates to get ready to fight and hoped Kohaku would stay safe. When they entered the monster's area, they were shocked by what they saw. The monster was on fire, burning like a giant bonfire. Everyone froze in place, too stunned to speak. Fen had defeated the spider monster all by himself. Claire remarked that the monster seemed weak, but Sufia warned them not to let their guard down. She joked that she wouldn't mind if Claire got eaten, since spiders love eating bugs. Kohaku tried to calm everyone down, but then noticed Asura and the others standing at the entrance. He wondered when they had arrived. Asura quickly explained that they didn't come to fight him. They had rushed in because of the monster. He also told Kohaku that the mining area had been declared a dangerous zone earlier that morning, and his team had been sent to deal with it. Sufia explained that dangerous zones were places marked as risky by hunters with special detection skills. She said these zones included areas like erupting volcanoes, rivers with strong currents that were impossible to cross, islands where lightning fell like rain, and spots where powerful monsters might appear. Asura admitted he hadn't expected Kohaku to reach the monster's area so quickly. Kohaku remembered telling Fen to dig deeper before the day ended. Asura apologized for not warning him about the monster and for almost putting him in danger. He asked Kohaku for forgiveness. But Kohaku felt even guiltier because he believed it was his own fault for spoiling Fen. He admitted he was to blame for all the digging around that area. Kohaku then asked Asura to leave it alone, deciding he needed to reflect on his actions. Asura simply smiled and said he understood. Then he asked Kohaku directly if he was a Phantasma Tamer. Kohaku was caught off guard. Asura reassured him that there was no point in hiding it since they had already heard rumors about a Phantasma Tamer recently joining the Tamer's Guild. Kohaku asked how Asura had guessed it was him. Asura explained he had noticed the Tamer's Guild brooch on Kohaku's jacket, but he hadn't seen any familiars nearby. Asura became even more convinced after witnessing how easily the spider monster was defeated. He was sure something was there, even if he couldn't see it. Kohaku had no choice but to admit the truth. Asura got excited when he learned that Kohaku was the real deal. He couldn't believe he was meeting someone legendary. Asura then introduced himself properly, saying his full name was Asur Kruetz, a swordsman from the Battle Guild. The man with glasses was Cole Magicalia, a magician, and the bald man was Round Barrett, a brawler. Kohaku was happy to meet them and introduced himself in return. Kohaku was surprised to see silver platers in such a dangerous area, and thought that everyone in the Battle Guild must be strong. Round laughed and said it was hard to tell the color of their plates because it was so dark in the mines. Asura then said they were mithril platers. Kohaku felt a chill run down his spine, realizing that some of the strongest people were standing right in front of him. Round couldn't help but laugh at Kohaku's reaction. Kohaku apologized for being rude, but Asura reassured him it was fine since he had already planned to meet Kohaku again in the future. Asura officially invited Kohaku to join the Battle Guild and offered a yearly contract with 50 platinum coins. On top of that, they would immediately give Kohaku a mithril plate, and he would get paid for completing requests. Sufia glared at Asura for offering such things to her master, but when she saw Kohaku's reaction, she felt relieved. Kohaku apologized and explained how Tawa had recognized him, and how everyone in the Tamer's Guild was excited to work with him. He wanted to stay with the Tamer's Guild because they were the first to welcome him. He hadn't been able to repay them yet, so that's why he couldn't join the Battle Guild. Asur thought Kohaku had finally found his place. He said it was okay for Kohaku to turn them down, as long as Kohaku's feelings were what mattered most. Then Asur remembered something and shared that the monster Kohaku defeated was called the Death Spider. Its body was made of magic crystals. Kohaku asked how this was different from magic stones, and Cole explained that magic stones were crystals formed from the magic inside a monster's body, while magic crystals were made from the magic that leaked out when a monster died. With a magic crystal that big, it probably held thousands of the monster's magic. Round told Kohaku to take as much of it as he could. Kohaku thought the Death Spider was their target to eliminate, but Asur reminded him that it was Kohaku who had defeated it. If he brought it back, it could be sold for a lot of money or used to make a magic weapon. As they were leaving, Cole called Asur a bad person for testing Kohaku. Roan said it might have been a test to see if Kohaku could be distracted by money. Asur was surprised that his teammates had figured it out. He was impressed by how Kohaku had followed his heart, and because of that, Asur didn't have anything to worry about. Roan then asked what Asur would do if Kohaku agreed to the offer. Cole reminded him that they couldn't recruit people from other guilds because of the rules. If Kohaku accepted the offer, Asur joked that he would happily do anything to get Kohaku into their guild. Cole teased Asur, saying he had fallen for Kohaku. Asur replied that he would do his best just to see Kohaku's powerful abilities up close. Meanwhile, Claire asked if Kohaku was sure about his decision. Kohaku said he wasn't working for money. Claire then asked what he was working for. Kohaku thought about his father's words, to be strong, brave, righteous, and sincere. Those words were what motivated him to keep working hard. Soon after, Kohaku returned to the guild. When Saria heard his voice, she quickly stood up, looking worried. She asked if he was okay. Kohaku was surprised and asked what was wrong. Saria told him that they had received a report about a monster appearing in the Raisin Mines 2 days ago. On the same day, Mithril Platers had gone to deal with it. Kohaku guessed Saria was talking about Asur and the others. Since it was the 3rd day, Saria couldn't help but worry about Kohaku's safety. She was relieved that he got back before meeting the monster. She thought he had turned back halfway through the trip. Kohaku stayed quiet, and Saria asked why he was looking away. Then Saria's voice echoed through the guild when she found out that Kohaku had defeated the dangerous monster all by himself. Kohaku corrected her, saying everyone worked together to defeat it. Saria thought that made sense, but she quickly denied it. She said that wasn't the problem at all. She was glad nothing worse had happened, but she reminded Kohaku about the dangers of being a hunter. She told him to run if he had to, since he only had one life. She apologized for getting upset. Saria just didn't want to see another hunter die. Kohaku thanked her for her words, and his sincerity made Saria start crying. Once she calmed down, Saria apologized for making a scene. She then remembered that Kohaku had asked for a magic weapon. She told him to bring out whatever he had from the mine doors, and the guild would deliver the rest later. Kohaku started pulling out iron ore and magic crystals, sorting them into groups. Saria couldn't believe what she was hearing and seeing. Not only were the ores high quality, but they also made her wonder if Kohaku was a master at mining. She asked for 2 hours for the guild to appraise everything and told him to go home in the meantime. As Kohaku left the guild, Sufia mentioned a blacksmith town called Flamelin to the southwest. She told him that a man named Zakis was considered the best blacksmith in town. Kohaku thanked her and wondered what kind of person Zakis might be. Sufia went on to explain that a magic weapon was one that contained magical power. For example, a sword with a fireball spell in it could cast the spell without using any mana when swung. She suggested Kohaku think carefully about which weapon would be best for him. Kohaku realized there were many options and he needed to find one that would suit him well. Sufia agreed, and after thinking about it, said that the best weapon for Kohaku would be a one-handed sword. Later in Flamelin, Kohaku and his familiars walked through the busy streets. Claire mentioned how much she liked the town's atmosphere. Kohaku was excited to explore this new place. Soon they noticed a crowd forming nearby, and Claire suggested they check it out. As they joined the crowd, Sufia pointed out a man in the center holding a magic weapon. Kohaku saw that he was holding a sword in front of a thick log. Kohaku watched the man closely. The man focused for a moment, then yelled loudly. He swung his magic sword at a thick log, and Kohaku was amazed when the log split in half. The surface even burned, all without the man saying any magic words. Kohaku thought the magic weapon was incredible. His eyes lit up as he imagined being able to do the same one day. Claire said she could do it too. Sufia, though, called her useless if a fire spirit like her couldn't manage it. The two started arguing, but Kohaku excitedly told them to move on to Zakis's place. A man with sideburns overheard and gave him a sharp look. He watched Kohaku walk away, wondering if he had really heard the name Zakis. Soon, the group reached Zakis's place, which looked like a rundown house, just as Claire had said. Kohaku joked that it was a charm point Claire wouldn't understand. He knocked on the door, but no one answered. Claire thought no one was home, but Sufia sensed someone inside. Kohaku then realized the door was unlocked and opened it. He apologized, thinking Zakis might be on a break, and asked if he could request a weapon. Something suddenly flew toward Kohaku and hit the wall, just missing him. Kohaku broke into a cold sweat and saw that an axe was stuck in the wall. A man holding a bottle of wine then asked who Kohaku was. Kohaku said he was there to ask for a weapon and introduced himself as a member of Alex's Tamer's guild. The man, Zakis, stopped drinking, slammed the bottle on the table, and asked if Kohaku was a hunter. Kohaku confirmed that he was. Zakis then told him to leave while using profanity. His words shocked Kohaku. He couldn't believe what he had just heard and asked if this man was really Zakus. Zakus confirmed it, and Kohaku asked if they could talk. Zakus told him to go home and angrily shared how he hated hunters like Kohaku. Zakus picked up a kitchen knife and screamed at him. Everyone was shocked. They quickly ran out of Zakus's house, dodging knives, bottles, and sticks. Sufia created a barrier to protect Kohaku, and Zakus slammed the door shut. Kohaku curled up on the ground. Claire and Fen couldn't believe how rude Zakus had been. Sufia asked Kohaku if he was okay. In a weak voice, Kohaku said he was, but it was clear he was struggling emotionally. She encouraged him to cheer up. Claire suggested they look for another good blacksmith, while Fen wondered if he should bite Zakus before they left. Kohaku told him to stop. Later at a bar, Claire mentioned how Kohaku really wanted a magic weapon. Sufia said it couldn't be helped since Zakus was the best blacksmith in town to make one. Their master, though, was very depressed. He sat at the bar, crying while drinking, and wondered why Zakus hated hunters so much. Just then, the man with sideburns from earlier sat next to Kohaku. He asked if Kohaku was a customer of Zakus. The man thought Kohaku had been turned away and was now drinking to forget. He said it in a kind way but suggested that Kohaku should give up on Zakus. Kohaku then asked who he was, and the man introduced himself as Kotori. It was an unusual name for someone with wild sideburns, and even Claire thought it was cute. Kohaku mentioned that he had heard Zakus was the best blacksmith in the country. Kotori agreed, saying that even the best craftsman in the country would admit that Zakus made the best swords. He explained that each sword used to cost a platinum coin. Kohaku was shocked by the price and hoped to see one. He asked Kotori if any of Zakus's swords were still being sold. Kotori told him that Zakus had destroyed every one of them, so there were none left. Kohaku couldn't believe it. Swords worth a platinum coin each had been casually destroyed. He asked Kotori why Zakus had done that. Kotori then used the opportunity to ask for money in exchange for information, and Kohaku had little choice but to give him 1 gold coin. As Kotori pocketed the coin, he asked Kohaku not to tell anyone what he was about to say. Kohaku promised to keep it a secret. Kotori began to explain that Zakus had a son, but before he went on, he asked how old Kohaku was. Kohaku replied that he had just turned 20. For some reason, Kotori's face looked sad. He said Zakus's son would be the same age as Kohaku if he were still alive. This caught Kohaku's attention. Kotori continued and said that Zakus's son had died 3 years ago. The son had gotten the divine job swordsman at age 13 and had become a hunter for the battle guild. At first, Zakus didn't want his son to become a hunter. Kohaku guessed it was because being a hunter meant always being close to danger. Kotori confirmed that, saying that father and son argued a lot about it. One day, after a big fight with his father, Zakus's son left home to live on his own. From then on, Zakus would read the guild's newspaper every day, probably because it listed the names of people who had died, and Zakus was worried about his son. Then one day, while reading the newspaper, Zakus's eyes widened. Kohaku guessed that the son's name had been listed, and Kotori confirmed it. Kotori went on to say that Zakus's son's body was brought back later that day. But that wasn't the shocking part. When Zakus checked his son's body, he noticed that the wounds were from a sword, which meant that his son had been killed by another human, not a monster. While everyone thought it was just a murder, Zakus knew it was more than that. Kotori revealed that Zakus's son had been killed by a sword that Zakus himself had made. Kohaku couldn't believe what he was hearing. Kotori explained how blacksmiths could never mistake a sword attack for anything else. Skilled craftsmen could tell what kind of weapon was used just by looking at the marks left by the sword. Someone like Zakus with his experience would instantly know what happened. Seeing Kohaku's worried expression, Kotori told him to stop thinking about asking Zakus for a sword. He explained that it all started with Zakus's son becoming a hunter, and the hunter who ended up killing him. Kotori also believed that Zakus thought he had killed his own son and felt guilty about it. He said Zakus couldn't swing his hammer anymore. Kohaku didn't know what to say to this. Soon after, Kohaku and the others went outside. Claire asked if Kohaku believed Kotori's story. Kohaku wasn't sure, but he thought visiting Asur might help him find some answers. Claire remembered that Asur was a nice guy and figured he might know something since they were both in the same battle guild. She wondered if Asur was back yet, and Kohaku thought he probably was. He believed the Platinum Party had a way to get home quickly. Later, at the Tamer's guild, Kohaku went to the reception office to exchange the money, as the amount was high. Saria handed over 1 platinum coin and 80 gold coins for the 900 kilograms of high-quality iron ore. Normally, 1 kilogram of iron ore was worth 5 silver coins, but Kohaku had brought in a better quality, so it was worth 20 silver coins per kilogram. Another staff member came up with something else, and Kohaku asked what the tray beside him was. The staff member nodded and smiled at Saria. She explained that the tray was for the conversion of the magic crystals. Kohaku was surprised to learn that 1 kilogram of magic crystals was worth 1 gold coin. Since there were 300 kilograms, he would receive 3 platinum coins for them. Plus, he would get 80 copper coins for completing the Raisin Mine quest. She offered to separate the coins into bags, and Kohaku thanked her. Kohaku placed the money in his bag and thought about how he might use it later. But this wasn't the time to plan spending. He still needed to visit the Battle Guild, so he quickly excused himself from Saria. Saria tried to stop him, but Kohaku didn't listen. He had something important to pick up, which was being held by Tawa's assistant. When Kohaku arrived at the Battle Guild, the strong smell of alcohol and cigarettes hit him before he even stepped inside. Sufia calmly used a deodorant field to clear the air, and Kohaku thanked her. The place was chaotic, filled with hunters fighting and yelling at each other. Kohaku worried it might take a while to find Asur. While he was looking around, a strange person approached him, claiming to sell medicine for only 20 gold coins. Sufia quickly checked and said it was just sugar. Kohaku refused to buy it and walked away. Two guild members nearby noticed Kohaku and grinned when they realized he was from the Tamer's guild. Kohaku, feeling uneasy about the noisy and messy place, decided to head straight to the reception desk. But before he could get far, people started whispering about him. They noticed he was a bronze Tamer and began teasing him, saying he must be lost. One hunter walked up to Kohaku, wrapped an arm around his shoulder, and offered to walk him home. However, the hunter demanded Kohaku hand over whatever was in his bag as payment. Others joined in, joking that Kohaku should leave his clothes behind too. Kohaku wasn't scared of the hunters themselves. He was afraid of what his familiars might do to them. Claire was ready to burn everything down. Fen wanted to bite them all. Sufia even offered to send their heads flying. Worried things would spiral out of control, Kohaku tried to excuse himself before things got worse. He knew if his familiars acted, he'd end up being hunted by the Battle Guild. The hunters kept bothering him, but Kohaku explained he was there to meet someone. They laughed, doubting that someone like Kohaku would know anyone in their guild. They joked that if he did, the person was probably weak and an embarrassment to the Battle Guild. At that moment, someone stepped in, apologizing for being a disgrace. The hunters froze when they heard the chilling voice. They turned to see Asur and his team standing at the entrance. Asur gave the hunters a cold glare and said Kohaku was his important guest. He noticed there was some trouble between Kohaku and the guild members, and demanded an explanation. The hunters couldn't respond at first, but when Asur angrily pushed them to talk, they quickly made an excuse. They said they didn't know Kohaku was connected to him. Asur, clearly unimpressed, said it seemed like everyone had too much free time since they chose to bother his friend. Asur walked over to Kohaku and his expression softened. He smiled brightly and said he was happy to see Kohaku visiting so soon. Kohaku started crying, overwhelmed with happiness and the feeling of sense of security Asur brought. Later, in the reception office, Cole mentioned how the quality of their guild had gone downhill. Asur replied that he would report the incident to the guildmaster and asked Cole for the names of the members who had bothered Kohaku. Then, Asur turned to Kohaku and asked why he had come. He wondered if it was finally time for Kohaku to join them. Kohaku explained that he had come for something else. He wanted to know more about a hunter named Dacus, who had passed away a few years ago. The room went silent for a moment. Then Asur asked Cole to make the room soundproof. Asur learned from Kohaku that he had discovered why Zakus could no longer use his hammer. Kohaku then asked what kind of person Zakus had been. Asur remembered Zakus as someone with the potential to become a mithril hunter just like him. Kohaku realized Zakus must have been an extraordinary person, and Asur confirmed it, sharing that everyone admired Zakus, including himself. However, Asur couldn't ignore the feeling that Zakus seemed to be rushing through life. Raun agreed, saying that Zakus wanted to grow stronger but still took on small mining jobs for bronze-ranked ores in his free time. Asur noticed Kohaku looked nervous and wondered if he was thinking about how Zakus might have been betrayed by a fellow hunter. Kohaku admitted that he was. Asur then shared that Zakus had been part of a 5-person team sent by the guild to destroy a certain organization. When Kohaku asked which organization it was, Asur asked if he had ever heard of Gurunkai. Kohaku apologized, saying he hadn't. Asur assured him it was fine not to know, as Gurunkai was a secret underground group hidden from the public. He explained that the organization worshipped the fire spirit. They kidnapped children under the age of 15 once a month and burned them alive as part of their rituals. When Fen and Sufia heard that, they stopped for a moment. Kohaku's face went blank while Claire silently pointed to herself. Sufia started wondering if Claire had some connection to them. Just to remind everyone, Claire was this world's fire spirit. Fen then asked Claire to turn herself in. Claire quickly denied it. She admitted that she was the only fire spirit, but she said she would never accept such cruel ways of prayer. Kohaku believed Claire wasn't that kind of person. He concluded that the Gurunkai were acting on their own, doing whatever they wanted. He asked if the Gurunkai had been defeated, but Asur said they had escaped, according to reports. Asur explained that Dacus could have stopped them if he hadn't been betrayed. Then, Asur corrected himself, saying betrayed wasn't the right word. He clarified that the people who went with Dacus for a mission were actually members of the Gurunkai. Kohaku went silent and started sweating. Acer continued, explaining that Dacus had been injured from surprise attacks from behind. After that, he was struck from the front, which was the fatal blow. Kohaku then asked when the guild had found out that the traitors were from the Gurunkai. Acer said they only learned about it 6 months after the incident. Hearing this, Kohaku's expression grew dark. Acer noticed and stepped closer, giving him a pat on the shoulder. He said that was all the information they had for now and asked if Kohaku had any more questions. Kohaku said he didn't and thanked them for the details. As Kohaku left the battle guild, he couldn't stop thinking about how Zacchus only knew what happened before the guild learned about Gurunkai. He was sure someone from the guild must have tried to explain it to Zacchus, but the blacksmith hadn't been in the best shape back then. Kohaku realized the misunderstanding still lingered, and that was why Zacchus resented the hunters. Sufia, who had been quietly watching her serious master, asked if he planned to clear up Zacchus's misunderstanding. Kohaku said he wanted to if it was possible. Sufia suggested that Zacchus needed to make peace with his past first, and she asked if Kohaku understood what she meant. Kohaku looked unsure, and Sufia admitted it wouldn't be an easy task. Even so, she believed there was only one way to make it happen. That night, Kohaku and his familiars headed to the ghost-infested zones south of the Brumand Kingdom. Claire grew frustrated with the number of ghosts floating around like pesky flies. Sufia explained that ghosts acted on pure instinct to attack the living, and the phantasmas were no different. Claire, irritated by Sufia's commentary, asked for help. Sufia mentioned that fire and light magic were effective against ghosts, but joked that Claire's matchstick power might not be enough to handle them. The comment annoyed Claire. More ghosts appeared, and Claire told Sufia to watch closely and remember this moment. She cast a powerful fire spell called Prominence, lighting up the night sky and sending fiery orbs streaking toward the swarming ghosts. The spell cleared out all the ghosts in the area. Kohaku thanked her, but Claire brushed it off, saying it was no big deal. Kohaku mentioned how much easier it was to see the ground now, thanks to Claire's efforts. Then he sensed something nearby, and Sufia confirmed it was the strongest ghost-type monster they had to defeat to get the item they needed. It was a lich, a high-ranked ghost monster holding a scythe. Kohaku remembered hearing that leeches were supposed to be immortal. Sufia agreed but explained that true immortality didn't exist. Even the lich had a weakness. She confidently said that Fen could easily defeat it. Fen told Kohaku to leave it to him. Kohaku then thought back to when Sufia explained how a ghost magic stone could help them with their current problem, and she seemed sure of it. Kohaku realized some people might call him a hypocrite or say this wasn't his responsibility. But remembering Zacchus, he couldn't ignore people who were suffering right in front of him. With that, Kohaku told everyone to go and fight the lich. They landed quickly and hid behind the monster. Kohaku remembered Sufia saying that Fen was strong enough to fight it, but he still wondered what the lich's weakness could be. Sufia had mentioned it was the head. She explained that leeches were once immortal wizards or sages, and by destroying their source of knowledge, their head, they could be defeated. Kohaku finally understood what needed to be done. Without giving the lich a chance to fight back, Fen lunged forward, biting and tearing off its head. Afterward, Fen held up the head, but Kohaku didn't know how to feel. The moment felt surprisingly uneventful. Fen then complained that the head didn't taste good, and the rest of the lich's body turned to ash. Kohaku wasn't surprised by the bad taste. Instead, he was amazed by Fen's powerful jaw. He thanked Fen for the effort. Sufia walked over to the lich's remains and picked up its magic stone. Kohaku stared at the grim red stone and thanked everyone for their help. With that, he decided it was time to head to his place next. The next morning, Zacchus visited his son's grave. While he was there, he noticed someone approaching. It was Kohaku. Zacchus asked him what he wanted. Kohaku explained that he had learned about Zacchus's son and offered his condolences for his loss. However, Zacchus cut him off, saying it was the fault of hunters like him. Kohaku tried to explain that he only wanted to clear up the misunderstanding, but Zacchus angrily told him to leave. Claire, watching from a distance, noticed that Zacchus seemed different than before. Despite Zacchus's anger, Kohaku told his companions to stay back and walked closer to him. Kohaku admitted he might be intruding, but he couldn't ignore Zacchus's pain. He said it was clear that Zacchus was hurting deeply. Zacchus didn't respond with words, he punched Kohaku instead. Then he grabbed Kohaku and angrily asked if he had any idea what it felt like to lose a son. He shouted, asking if Kohaku could even imagine how his son felt before dying. Zacchus tried to punch him again, accusing hunters like Kohaku of abandoning their own loved ones and knowing nothing about real pain. Surprisingly, Kohaku caught Zacchus's fist. He paused as something clicked in his mind. From the way Zacchus was speaking, Kohaku realized something important. If Zacchus truly believed a hunter had killed his son, he would have said murdered. But instead, Zacchus kept saying his son was abandoned. This hinted that Zacchus knew the truth, that his son hadn't been killed by a hunter after all. Zakis, flustered by Kohaku's realization, let go of him and brushed it off, saying it was just a figure of speech. But he still angrily claimed all hunters were worthless. In a flashback, Zakis was seen asking Asur to deliver a sword to his son. Zakis made Asur promise to say it was a gift from him, not from Zakis. This showed that Zakis, despite his rough demeanor, cared deeply for his son but didn't know how to express it. Back in the present, Zakis bitterly said his son died because he was surrounded by awful people. Kohaku agreed that his son might have been let down by others, but he firmly disagreed with Zakis's claim that all hunters were worthless. Zakis remembered the time when his son reminded him about his role as a divine swordsman. His son told him that he couldn't be a blacksmith because that's just how the world worked. Zakis argued that he could still become a blacksmith if he taught him the craft. He also told his son not to risk his life unnecessarily. Dakis tried to explain his reasoning, but Zakis refused to listen, dismissing it as pointless talk. Instead, he instructed his son to head to the workshop. Dakis, however, firmly stated that his words were not meaningless. Later, Zakis thought about his son's words again after noticing Kohaku's serious expression. Kohaku shared how others admired Dakis, saying he could have become a mithril-ranked hunter if he had lived. People also mentioned that Dakis seemed like he was always in a rush. Kohaku asked if Zakis knew why. Zakis admitted he didn't know, and Kohaku expected that answer. He explained that it was something no one else seemed to understand either. Kohaku then revealed a magic stone he had obtained from a lich. He explained that the stone could temporarily summon the soul of someone who had passed away, allowing them to speak. Kohaku suggested using it to ask Dakis why he was always in a hurry or anything else Zakis wanted to know. However, if it wasn't necessary, Kohaku was fine not using the stone. Zakis began to sweat. He regretted everything after losing his son and wondered if he could really talk to him again. Still, he reached for the magic stone. The moment he held it, a ghostly fog surrounded them. On top of the grave, his form appeared. Father and son looked at each other, both surprised. The first thing Zakis did was kneel on the ground and apologize. He said he was sorry for not listening to Dakis that day when he was struggling and for failing to protect him. But then, Dakis stepped closer to his father and said he should be the one apologizing. He admitted that he had chosen his own path and that it had led to his death before his father's time. Dakis asked for forgiveness for leaving first. Tears ran down Zakis's face as he told Dakis it wasn't his fault at all. Then Zakis finally asked why Dakis had decided to become a swordsman. Dakis gave a sad smile and said he had always wanted to be like his father. His reason was simple. Zakis was someone who made the best weapons in the world. But when Dakis discovered his divine job was to be a swordsman, he realized he could never match his father's skill as a craftsman. So, Dakis decided to help his father in another way. He started gathering materials like iron ore and magic stones, aiming to find better quality items for better weapons. Zakis then remembered Kohaku mentioning how Dakis had taken ore gathering quests during his spare time, and it all made sense now. Dakis explained that as he gained more experience and grew stronger, his rank as a swordsman rose. This allowed him to enter dangerous areas and collect rare, high-quality materials. He had dreamed of his father creating the best sword in the world using those materials, ones he would gather himself. Dakis then recalled receiving a sword from someone named Asur. The moment he saw the mark on the sheath, he knew it was his father's work. That realization filled him with pride. Dakis turned to Kohaku and asked for his name. Kohaku introduced himself. Then Dakis asked him to fulfill an unfinished dream. Sufia confirmed that Dakis could see them in his spirit form. This was when Dakis finally realized that phantasmas were real. Claire and Fen grew excited because it was Kohaku's chance to finally get the sword he had been wanting. Zakis realized that Kohaku had been a phantasma Tamer all along. He looked at his son's determined face and asked Kohaku for the same thing, helping to fulfill their shared dream. Instead of it being only his son's dream, Zakis asked Kohaku to help them both. Dakis was surprised by this. Zakis then bowed and said he was at peace now. Kohaku said he understood and promised to help them achieve their dream. Dakis was happy to hear this, but knew his time was running out. As his hand began to fade, he said it was almost time for him to go. Zakis felt grateful they had the chance to talk one last time. Dakis felt the same and thanked Kohaku for everything. Before disappearing, he told his father to live a long life. Then, like the wind, Dakis was gone. Zakis apologized to Kohaku for hitting him. Kohaku said he was fine, and asked Zakis to speak to him casually, as it would make him more comfortable. Just then, Asur and his team arrived, looking puzzled when they saw Kohaku with Zakis. Kohaku asked why they were there, but Asur had the same question. Zakis explained that the group visited every year on the same day because it was the anniversary of Das's death. After a brief silence, Zakis thanked Asur and his team. He acknowledged how kind they had been to his son even though he had treated them poorly. Asur assured him it was fine. Zakis admitted that he had always known the hunters weren't truly at fault for his son's death, but he had blamed them anyway. In the past, Asur had formally apologized for not being able to save Dacus, but Zakis had argued they could have made it in time. This time, Zakis apologized to Asur and the group. He also expressed his gratitude for how they had cared for his son. The group fell silent again and the atmosphere grew heavier with emotion. Zakis explained that it was because of a magic stone that he was able to talk to his son again. Cole was surprised and asked where he got it. Zakis said it came from Kohaku, who had encouraged him to reach out to his son. Raun asked if it was true that Kohaku had defeated a lich. Kohaku admitted that it was actually his familiars who did most of the work. Cole couldn't believe the kind of power a phantasma Tamer must have to beat such a powerful monster. Zakis then said he would head back to the workshop with Kohaku and ask the others about their plans. Asur mentioned that they still had tasks to complete at the guild. With that, Zakis dragged Kohaku along to the workshop. Asur watched them leave and commented that he hadn't seen Zakis look so happy in years. Cole pointed out that Asur had also just looked relieved. Realizing this, Asur agreed that he might be feeling that way after all. Inside the workshop, Kohaku looked around while Zakis apologized for the dust, explaining that he needed to check and clean his equipment first. Just then, Sufia called for Kohaku's attention. Zakis found his hammer and mentioned that it had been a long time since he last used it. Kohaku suggested leaving the maintenance and cleaning to his familiars, saying one of them was good at those tasks. Zakis agreed and let them handle it, deciding to check his inventory next. However, he remembered selling off his stock of iron ore and magic crystals to pay for his liquor. Kohaku reassured him not to worry. When Zakis inspected the materials Kohaku had brought, he realized they were high quality and perfect for crafting an exceptional weapon. As he held the iron ore, Zakis paused, thinking about how his son had asked Kohaku for help. Determined, he told Kohaku that he would do it. He would create the best weapon in the world. His promise made Kohaku excited. Before getting started, Zakis said he needed to plan and asked if Kohaku could drink. Kohaku admitted he could drink a little but was surprised when Zakis proposed a drinking session. Zakis declared it a special day and added that he was sure Dacus wouldn't mind if they opened the precious liquor he had been saving. That night, Asur returned to his guild and told the guildmaster, Leon Leverard, that Zakis had finally returned to smithing. Leon was happy to hear that and praised Asur for his efforts. Asur said he wasn't the one who saved Zakis. Leon already had an idea and Asur confirmed it was the person Leon thought of. Leon couldn't believe that a lich was also defeated by the same person who had defeated the Death Spider. He said both monsters were mithril ranked. Asur agreed. Leon could tell Asur was telling the truth, but he couldn't just believe any story. He said he would meet the boy and asked Asur to take him there. Leon looked out the window and thought about the legendary Tamer. He couldn't believe such a person really existed. He then picked up a book titled Heroic Tales. The next morning, Zakis held a paper and told Kohaku to leave everything to him. He checked his forge and noticed something strange about the flames. Suddenly, characters appeared in the air, telling Zakis that the holy flames would never go out. For Kohaku's sake, Claire had given Zakis part of her power to help him do his best. Zakis thought Claire was thoughtful. He put on his headband and thanked Kohaku for helping him solve his doubts. Kohaku had cleared up the misunderstanding, so Zakis promised to give everything he had. He would do this for Kohaku, who had helped him find the answers. Meanwhile, in the nearby streets, people started hearing the familiar sounds of a hammer coming from Zakis's place. Everyone got excited, wondering if Zakis was really back to work. Kotori, who was also forging a sword, sighed and commented on how late Zakis was. A few days later, Kohaku got the news that Zakis had finally finished the sword. He was so excited that he had already started practicing how to use a one-handed sword with Sufia's help. Kohaku quickly went to Zakis's place. Zakis said the sword was ready and claimed it was the best sword in the world. Kohaku asked if he could test it out and Zakis agreed, saying he'd love some feedback. When Kohaku held the sheathed sword, he noticed how light it was. He could barely feel any weight. Zakis explained that he had made it with Kohaku's needs in mind, knowing that, as a Tamer, Kohaku wasn't as strong as a swordsman. Kohaku felt touched by Zakis's thoughtfulness. Zakis then confidently told him to pull out the sword. Kohaku unsheathed it, and his familiars admired its beautiful blue color. Knowing it was a magic sword, Kohaku asked what it could do. Zakis said the appraisal simply called it cutter. He said it would be easier to show, so he placed a high-quality iron ore on the table. He told Kohaku to hold the sword and focus on the ore. As Kohaku concentrated, he noticed a red line cutting through the iron ore. Zakis asked if Kohaku could see the line and told him to push down the sword along it. Following the red line, Kohaku sliced the iron ore cleanly in half. Kohaku was amazed and couldn't believe how the sword cut so easily. Zakis agreed that the sword was incredibly sharp, but he said that wasn't its main strength. He explained that the sword allowed him to sense his opponent's intentions. Basically, it gave answers. Zakis said if Kohaku could cut through those answers, even the hardest ore, armor, or dragon scales would be as easy to cut as slime. Kohaku felt a little nervous, realizing how unreal the sword's sharpness was. He then asked if the sword had a name. Zakis confirmed it did and told a quick story about a sacred weapon from long ago, one that had the same cutter effect. It was called Fragarak, the Answerer. Zakis said that was the sword's name. Kohaku felt honored to receive Fragarak. He tried to pay Zakis for the sword, but the blacksmith refused. He explained that the sword was a symbol of their friendship. However, Zakis said if Kohaku really wanted to repay him, he could do one thing: spread the word that Zakis was back in business. Kohaku agreed and thanked him sincerely for the sword. Zakis just laughed and told Kohaku to stay strong. For Dakis' sake, he said, Kohaku should let the world know his name. Kohaku promised he would. At the Tamer's guild, Fen asked if Kohaku would finally take on a request that involved a fight. Kohaku said he was ready now that he had a weapon. He wasn't sure if someone like him with just a bronze plate would get a subjugation quest, but he just wanted to try out the sword as soon as possible. Suddenly, Kohaku noticed a crowd gathering in front of the guild. He asked what was happening, and some of the members said that Saria wasn't feeling well. They pointed out that she had been signing a lot lately. However, no one thought she actually looked sick and told Kohaku to pay attention to her sad expression. Seeing her, they guessed there was something bothering her. But since they couldn't ask her directly, they were just talking about what it could be. Then, Sufia and Claire started teasing the guild members who seemed to have a crush on Saria. Kohaku told them to stop. Kohaku asked the others if it would be better for him to take the request later. The group, however, believed that Saria would help if he asked. Then Saria overheard voices at the entrance and recognized one of them. She looked up and saw Kohaku. Tears filled her eyes and she called his name out loud. Kohaku was confused. As she walked toward him, clearly upset, she said she had been waiting for him for days to tell him something important. The guild members were shocked to learn that Kohaku was the reason Saria had been feeling down lately. Saria said she had good news for him. Claire, Sufia, and the other guild members looked at Kohaku and asked if the two of them had already done the deed. Kohaku felt cornered by Saria's misleading words. He asked her to share the news, hoping she would explain it in front of everyone, assuming it might be something important for everyone to hear too. Kohaku only wanted Saria to clear up the misunderstanding, but Saria stayed silent for a while, looking like a maiden in love and blushing. She said they weren't in the right place to talk about it. Kohaku realized he was in trouble. He quickly grabbed her and pulled her away to a quieter spot. Later in the reception room, Claire and Sufia glared at their master, upset about what they thought was his unfaithfulness. Saria noticed Kohaku looked tired and asked why. He said someone had made a comment in front of everyone that put him in a difficult situation. Saria, surprised, asked who it was so she could handle it. It seemed like someone had been careless. Kohaku, trying to stay calm, asked what the big and important news was. Saria placed a letter on the table and told him to look. When Kohaku opened it, he found a new brooch inside. He couldn't believe it. Saria congratulated him, saying he was the fastest member in the guild's history to be promoted to silver rank. She explained she had planned to give it to him earlier, but he had left too quickly. Claire and Sufia exchanged glances, realizing they had misunderstood. They quickly said they had always trusted their master. Kohaku didn't buy it and called them liars. Kohaku said all he did was gather herbs and iron ore. Saria noticed, however, that the quality of what he brought was far better than what was expected for someone of his rank. After talking with the guildmaster, the guild decided to promote Kohaku. But Saria could see that Kohaku didn't look happy. He admitted that he didn't feel like he deserved the promotion. Saria told him it wasn't special treatment at all. She explained that he had already earned enough credit for his work as a Tamer in their guild. She also mentioned that the promotion wasn't just for him, it would help the guild too. Kohaku seemed confused, so she explained further. She said that as people rise in rank, there are fewer and fewer of them, which left the guild short on skilled members. Promoting capable people, even as exceptions, would help the guild take on harder tasks. That was why they promoted him. Saria encouraged Kohaku to feel proud of himself, pointing out how well he and his phantasmas were doing. Kohaku finally accepted it, holding the silver brooch before pinning it to his jacket. Then Saria asked if he wanted to take on silver-ranked requests right away. Kohaku said he actually came for a goblin subjugation request. Since it was his first time, he wanted to try it out with his sword. He then showed Saria a magic sword called Fragarak. When Saria asked who made the sword, Kohaku said it was Zakis. Hearing the name shocked Saria. She couldn't believe that master craftsman Zakis Royman had made a sword for Kohaku. What surprised her even more was that Kohaku didn't even know Zakis's full name or title. Saria remembered a rumor that Zakis had stopped making weapons for 3 years. She asked what had happened. Kohaku simply replied that a lot had happened. When Saria pressed for details, Kohaku realized he couldn't avoid explaining. Feeling like he had no choice, he began to share everything that happened to him. Saria, overwhelmed by the amount of information she had just received, promised to keep everything confidential. However, she knew she had to report it to the guildmaster. Struggling to process how a bronze-plate adventurer had defeated a mithril-ranked monster, she asked Kohaku if he really planned to take on a goblin subjugation quest and told him to wait while she figured things out. Kohaku was then assigned a quest to eliminate 10 goblins in the wilderness west of Mirazona village. Since the village was nearby, he decided to travel there on foot. Sufia suggested he wear simpler clothes, which left Kohaku puzzled. She explained that Mirazona village was known as the poorest village in the region, so wearing modest clothing would help him blend in better. Kohaku understood and waved goodbye to Saria, who was still trying to process everything. When they arrived at Mirazona village, it wasn't what Kohaku had expected. Instead of looking poor, the village seemed cheerful and full of life. The crops were thriving and everyone appeared happy. This confused the group. So Kohaku asked Sufia for her opinion. Sufia said her scans showed nothing unusual, but suspected that something supernatural might be at play. She suggested it could be the work of a phantasma since her scans weren't detecting anything wrong. Kohaku glanced around the village, wondering if it really was a phantasma's doing. He decided they would investigate the matter further after completing their main task. In the wilderness, it didn't take long for them to find the goblins thanks to Fen's sharp sense of smell. Kohaku hid behind some large rocks and carefully studied the situation. Just as the request had described, the goblins moved in a tight group of 10. Kohaku had never used his sword on a moving target before, but with the sword's power, he could see glowing lines showing exactly where to strike. Sufia noticed her master was tense and asked if she could help. She reminded him about his previous fight with Tawa and Crush, where she had used enchantment magic. Kohaku asked if she could use the same magic now, and Sufia confirmed she could. She explained that Tamers were meant to fight alongside their familiars, not alone. However, only a few monsters could use magic or enchantments, which was why the method wasn't widely known. Then she asked for Kohaku's thoughts. Kohaku hesitated for a moment. He remembered how, in past battles, everyone else fought while he stayed behind, waiting for the fight to end. This time, knowing he could fight with his familiars, Kohaku agreed with Sufia's idea. Sufia used her magic and cast Fencer Enchant on Kohaku. Magical energy flowed into him. She reminded Kohaku that he wasn't skilled in sword fighting since he wasn't a swordsman. Kohaku understood her warning completely. He then stepped toward the goblins and drew his sword. As soon as they saw him, the goblins charged at him. With the enchantment, Kohaku suddenly knew how to move and how to swing his sword. Sufia seemed confident, while Claire and Fen watched eagerly to see him in action. In a flash, Kohaku moved past the goblins almost as if he teleported. The goblins' heads were split in two and began to fall to the ground. The fight was over in an instant. Kohaku finally experienced the power of Fencer Enchant. Fen and Claire cheered for him, calling his moves amazing. Kohaku thanked them, saying it was all because of their support. He felt grateful to everyone who had helped him reach this point. In the past, all he could do was watch his familiars fight from behind, but now he felt confident that one day he could stand alongside them as equals in battle. With that, the group went their way back to Mirazona village. That is the end of the recap at Chapter 14. Please read the pinned comment about the next part.